Good evening, brothers and sisters. Welcome along to the class here tonight. This is obviously Brother Brian is going to be leading class tonight on More Wonders of Creation. So that's should be very interesting again, as have been the other couple of nights which we've received in the last 12 months or so. Our opening hymn this evening is hymn number 72. Yahweh, Elohim of Israel, the mighty God in heavens above, thou who hast created all things, and for thy pleasure and for thy purpose they were created. Thou dost sustain thou hast made all things through thy Spirit, and to sustain all things by thy Spirit. Thou alone art worthy to be praised, as we are insignificant creatures in thy sight. We look forward to that time, loving Father, when not only will the nature, the handiwork of thy creation praise thy name, but all mankind will praise thy name too. Would all men will come to know thee as the only true and living God. We ask that thy guidance might be with us this evening as we consider some of the handiwork of thy creation, and we offer these our praises, seeking for thy blessing. Through Jesus our Saviour's name, amen. As an introduction to the study this evening, we'll read from Psalm 8. O Yahweh, our Lord, how excellent is thy name in all the earth. Who has set thy glory above the heavens? Out of the mouth of babes and sucklings hast thou attained strength, because of thine enemies, that thou mightest still the enemy and the avenger. When I consider thy heavens, the work of thy fingers, the moon and the stars which thou hast ordained, what is man that thou art mindful of him, and the Son of Man that thou visitest him? For thou hast made him a little lower than the angels, and hast crowned him with glory and honour. Thou madest him to have dominion over the work of thy hands, and thou hast put all things under his feet, all sheep and oxen, yea, and the beasts of the field, the fowl of the air, and the fish of the sea, and whatsoever passeth through the paths of the seas. O Yahweh our Lord, how excellent is thy name in all the earth. Now I ask Brother Brian to come forward. Give us a study.
Thanks, Neil. What time do I need to finish?
About 8, I think. No, about 8:30.
8:30, okay. Thanks, Neil, and good evening, everyone. It's very good to be with you. One of the main reasons that I've mentioned in previous talks for belief in God is the jaw-dropping magnificence and amazing ingenuity found everywhere in the natural world. Living things, something I like to talk about a lot, are exquisite, but they're also insanely complex and ever so finely tuned. Only really in the last decades we've found out how intricate they are. And as time goes on, they become more and more intricate. But not only living things, but also the universe itself, which is something I want to talk to you about this evening. But just a little bit of a preamble. It's not just surprising that life exists at all against all the odds. Okay, the most intelligent of scientists cannot produce life in the laboratory. It's impossible, and it will always be impossible. Okay, because the jump is too big from non-life. It's not possible. It's not that we, don't have the technology yet. It's just you can't jump that far. That's the problem. So it's not just surprising that life exists at all, or that it exists only one planet in the entire universe, but that life here is almost infinitely diverse. Like, not only do we have life, but we've got fantastic life. Okay, unique life. Turn over any rock, wherever you go, you find something incredible. I was just seeing on the media just recently, people over in Melbourne are splashing through the surf, with that light stuff in the middle of the night, with the waves all glowing in the dark and stuff. These are just incredible things that human beings have been able to discover, having been let loose on this awesome world that we live in. It reminds me of God's miracles. When Israel went to the land, Jericho, the walls fell down. They never did that again. Every time, then a giant hailstone. I mean, every miracle is a new miracle, and every animal you pick up, every plant you pick up is a new miracle. They just do everything different. So that massive biodiversity we have here on the planet is quite amazing. Let's just flick through a couple. I don't think I've shown you these ones before. The mantis shrimp, one of my favourite. little animals, they see in 16 colours. I mean, it's just a shrimp. They see in 16 colours. What's wrong with, 3 or 5 or 6? And when they smash their foreleg against something, they move at 23 metres a second. Now, boxers punch through the air at 8 metres a second. So Muhammad Ali, too slow. I mean, they punch so fast it boils the water. When they hit a crab or something like that. They're amazing. Really big things like sperm whales, the loudest animal on the planet. You don't want to be near one of these when it speaks to you underwater. They're louder than a jet engine. Sorry, Jonathan. Electric eels. There are some animals which echolocate, such as the whale, and there's other animals that electrolocate. These electric eels, they can produce 860 volts. They kill a person, no trouble at all. Amazing. And humans looked at that and they designed the battery. Didn't know there was electricity before that. Axolotls. I notice the Israelis are just injecting cells into people with broken backs, trying to cure them. They've done it with rats, and now they're going to try it with humans. Regenerate these things, the axolotls, wonderful little animals to keep. You could rip their leg off and come back in a couple of months. They grow the whole limb back, the bone, the nerves, the blood, the skin, everything. They just grow everything back. Peregrine falcon. I mean, every animal's got its own little thing. They're the fastest animals alive. 390 kilometres an hour they travel, coming down. And their nostrils, they've got these little cone nostrils so they can breathe. You mightn't know it unless you've stuck your head out the window while you're driving along or skydiving. So it's very difficult to breathe in fast-moving air. So if you've stuck your head out the window when Dad's going down the freeway at 390, difficult to breathe. So these have got special little nostrils, cone nostrils, which slows the air down, which allows them to breathe. Otherwise, they'd drop out of the sky. Tardigrades. I remember some Euros I had a few years ago talking about tardigrades. Mother said, "Tardigrades are my favourite animal." I thought, I didn't know you knew what a tardigrade was. These little tiny things, basically indestructible. You can boil them, you can freeze them, you can starve them, you can put them into space. You just can't kill them. They're just amazing. The most poisonous animal in the world. Anybody know what the most poisonous animal in the world? It's not a snake. It's one of these poison arrow frogs, poison dart frogs. It's the most deadly animal in the world, but they don't produce poison. They get poisoned by the things that they eat, and they put that poison from what they eat into their skin. And they become the most poisonous animal in the world. The taipan, the previous picture here, taipan is the most venomous. You notice all the Australian ones, tiger snake, eastern brown, coastal taipan, inland taipan. Inland taipan is the most poisonous snake venomous snake in the world. And look, the golden dart frog, you need 0.2 micrograms, that's a millionth of a gram per kilogram, compared to 25 from the inland taipan. You could just pick up one of these things and it could kill you. It's a little tiny frog. And the Indians used to use it, on the arrows and stuff like that, blow darts and stuff. Little nudibranchs, these are little slugs that live in the ocean. They do the same thing. They eat poisonous things and they become poisonous because they have no defence. They don't have a shell. They're just a little slug. Okay? One of my favourite things is they can eat these special stinging cells from jellyfish and corals. Now these nematocysts, you can see one in here. These are amazing in themselves because they have a little trigger and they have a harpoon inside. So when you brush up against a jellyfish, a poisonous one, these little nematocysts all go off and they shoot these arrows into your skin and they pump the poison through that little thread there into your skin. Well, these slugs, they go around, they swallow all these nematocysts and then they put them in their skin. So anything that touches them, they get shot by those nematocysts, those stinging cells. How do they do that? How does anybody do that? I mean, you eat them, they don't get in your skin, you don't, it's just like, how did that ever happen? Whoever came up with that idea? It's crazy. Another little favourite of mine is the leaf sheep. This is actually a type of nudibranch as well. But these things, when they eat the algae, they keep the chloroplast. The chloroplast is a little organelle inside the algae that does photosynthesis. And they put those little organelles, instead of digesting them, they put them into their skin. And they turn themselves into a plant, basically. They photosynthesize. So they don't have to eat. They just have sunlight and CO2, and they make their own food. It's just because maybe they get sick of eating, It's, imagine eating a lettuce and turning green and then not having to eat it for a while because you've got all these green things in your skin. I think I talked about eyes previously, but I do like dragonfly eyes. You might think your eyes are complicated, but these guys have got about 30,000 eyes. 30,000 eyes. They've all got their own cornea, their own lens, their own receptor cells. They can see basically 360 degrees. And these are amazing animals. They are the deadliest predator on the earth. Lions, I think, they reckon lions kill prey about 30% of each time they go out hunting. These guys, 97% of the time. Okay, so basically they never miss. And the way they do it, because their brains are about that big, they actually calculate when there's a fly or a mosquito going along. They don't chase the fly or the mosquito. They calculate where it's going to be in 1 second, where it's going to be, and they just go straight to that spot. Bang. None of this chasing things, You just head them off at the pass. And every animal, every plant basically has got its own unique set of things that it does. A bit like people, really. People are unique as well, what they can do. So, as I said last time or the time before, in the past, people imagined, before they got microscopes and stuff like that, they thought that cells were just simple bits of goo, gobs of goo. You can't get away with that idea anymore, really. You need to be slapped if you think anything like that. They're more like advanced supercomputers, stunningly sophisticated, and the more we learn, the more gobsmacked we become. But tonight, I want to spend a little bit more on the telescope side of things. I've got to get off biology and get onto a little bit of astronomy. So, I'm going to talk about, first of all, the special things about the Earth, special things about the sun, special things about lots of different things, and then the special things about the universe itself. Okay? So, I'm not going to read everything on these slides. You'll need to do that if you want to read them, then that's fine. But basically, the Earth is in what we call the Goldilocks zone. Everything about the Earth is just right. You remember Goldilocks? Too hot, too cold, too soft, too hard, or whatever it was, and everything in the middle just right. And that's really what the Earth is. It has it's won the jackpot for everything that it needs to have right. Okay. It's custom designed for living things. So the most obvious one is the position away from the sun. If you're too close, it's going to be too hot. If you're too far away, it's going to be too cold. And you can see a couple of stats here. Mercury, look how hot Mercury is. Look how hot Venus is. Look how cold Mars is. And there's the Earth. Okay, it's unique. It's just the right spot. And it's just that optimum ideal position. But there are something like 250 different optimised features that people look at. The sun, for example, it's just exactly the right sun for us. It's a yellow dwarf, which is pretty uncommon. Only 9% of stars are yellow dwarfs. It's small. Okay, it's not too hot. It's not too cold. Gives the right amount of light, right type of lights. It lasts for a long time, and it's very stable. Okay, now, this is unusual to get. So not only are we in the right spot, but we have exactly the right type of sun or star to be near. Now, if you have a close look at the sun, it's basically a controlled hydrogen explosion. Okay, a hydrogen bomb, nuclear bomb. But this is a controlled explosion. It's going to take, theoretically millions of years for it to actually progress. Now, in the universe, 97% of the universe is made up of hydrogen and helium. 97%, that's a lot. Okay, on the Earth, 1%. We don't want hydrogen and helium, unless you want a squeaky voice, on the Earth. The Earth has got much heavier atoms that don't occur very often anywhere else in the universe, like oxygen. Okay, with 32% of the Earth is oxygen atoms. So the Earth is unique. Would you believe it? The Earth has got a force field around it. We're flying through space with this force field around us. Okay, it's a magnetic field. So like a spaceship with a force field around it protecting it. Who would have believed? And they think it's caused by the iron core inside the Earth, producing this huge magnetic field around it. And, and streaming out of the sun is what they call the solar wind at 300 kilometres a second. So this solar wind is blasting out in every direction, and some of it is headed towards the Earth. And if we didn't have a magnetic field in here, we'd be getting blasted by all of this radiation. You go up to the moon and take off your kit up there, and you won't last very long, well, for a couple of reasons, but one of them is because you get hit by all this radiation, because it doesn't have an atmosphere, it doesn't have an ozone layer, it doesn't have a force field, magnetic field around it. Okay, that's the moon. But down here we have this protection. The auroras that you see is from this solar wind shooting through the atmosphere, and some of it is absorbed by the atmosphere, and the electrons get excited to a higher level, and then when they come back down again, they release that energy as light. And I don't know whether anybody's ever been to see the Northern Lights or whether you've seen the Southern Lights here, but that's what it is. It's evidence of the solar wind, a lethal solar wind, but we're being protected from that. The Earth is called the blue planet, and for good reason. We have all three states of water on the Earth. No other planet does, so it's absolutely unique to the Earth. Ice, water and water vapour. Other planets don't have liquid water, but we have a lot of it. So not only do we have things, we have a lot of it as well. You know, the Earth is rich in all the good things that it needs. One of those reasons why it's important to have is because the thermal properties of water stops the Earth from getting too hot. The water, you know, is pretty hard to heat up. You've got to pump a lot of heat into your kettle to heat the water up. Huge amount of heat. Huge amount of heat. Another thing is that water, that is what we call the density anomaly, where the solid water floats. Now, solid's normally heavier than the liquid. All other substances, when you freeze it, it's heavier, more dense when it freezes, and it'll sink. Not water. Water floats. If that were not true, the lakes that freeze in the Northern Hemisphere, for example, they would freeze from the bottom up, and they would never thaw out even during summer. Never. It would never, all the fish would be frozen, and that would be the end. All the beaver and everything would be frozen. But instead it freezes the top part into ice, which floats on the water and keeps the rest of the water liquid. I mean, we just go on and on about all of these sorts of things. The Earth is just the right mass. There it is down there. It's just the right mass. Now, the moon, for example, is too small to hold any atmosphere. So if you went up there with a big pump and let go a whole lot of air, it would just float off. There's not enough gravity. Whereas with Jupiter, Jupiter is so massive, it retains all the poisonous gases. And anyway, the gravity is so huge that you'd weigh 2.5 times what you weigh here. And that would make walking around pretty difficult. So what's the point in having these other planets? Well, one example is that these big planets, they sweep all the meteors, all the dust and stuff as the Earth is revolving around the sun. These planets are sucking in all the dust and all the meteors, all the junk, cleaning space ahead of the Earth, and otherwise we'd be getting bombarded by rocks and stuff much more than what we do already. The atmosphere is unique. Don't talk about the ozone layer anymore, but the ozone layer is this special layer that filters out more radiation than the magnetic field. 21% of the air is oxygen. Okay, so it's whereas 78 is unreactive nitrogen. So 78% of what you're breathing, you just breathe straight back out again. Okay, but people think, well, what would have happened if we had more oxygen? Wouldn't that be better? Well, no, because if there was more oxygen, it'd be very hard to put out fires. You'd have bushfire, and you wouldn't be able to get anywhere near it. I don't know if you've ever seen when you burn something in pure oxygen. It's scary. The Earth is on a tilt. It's on a 23.4 degree tilt, which gives us our seasons. If we didn't have the tilt, we wouldn't have seasons. If you had more of a tilt, then the temperatures would be much more extreme. You'd have super hot summers and super cold winters. If it was tilted less, then you would get very hot near the equator and very cold near the poles. So life on Earth would be much more difficult, if not impossible, if we did not have that exact 23.4 degree tilt. Who would have thought? We'd have everything else right, and if we'd ended up with one of these tilts over here, there would be no life. Like when you win the lottery, you've got to get all the numbers right. You can't get 9 out of 10. You don't win anything. And the Earth just ticks every box. I've always thought it's amazing that the sun and the moon look like they're the same size in the sky. Have you ever noticed that? They look the same size. But the sun is 1.4 million kilometres wide, and the moon's only 3,000 kilometres wide. But they look the same because the sun's a long way away and the moon is really close. And during a solar eclipse, look at that. What's the chance of that? What's the chance during a solar eclipse for the moon just fits perfectly over the sun? That's amazing. It's unbelievable. Unbelievable. And the reason for it is that the sun is 400 times the size of the moon, but it's 400 times the distance away from the Earth, so they look the same size. And when they apparently appear to come together, they are the same size. The moon is a very large moon compared to most planets, but one of the big things it does is it causes the tides. Okay, it stirs the ocean. It stabilises the Earth's rotation. If we didn't have the moon, we wouldn't have tides, and the seas would be stagnant, and life would be much less capable in those places. So, we have life here on the earth. Not only do we have life, we have diverse life. Not only do we have diverse life, we have intelligent life. That seems to be pretty hard to come across these days when you have a look around. But, you know, what humans have done from horseback to space travel in the last 200 years, hard to keep up. Hard to keep up for the oldies, isn't it, Axel? Hard to keep up. Now, the question is what they call the Fermi paradox. Where is everybody? You know, it's like you go to school, you park your bike, you walk in school and you say, where is everybody? Oh, it's holiday today. Oh. Whoops. And here we are on the earth, and the universe is supposed to be, 13 billion years old. And they've done all the maths. The place should be teeming with life, if it's possible. They haven't done the maths on that bit, It should be teeming with life. There should be advanced civilizations all over the universe. But where is everybody? I haven't found anybody yet. The SETI has been scanning the universe at the rate of millions of radio frequencies every second for 65 years, and they haven't heard anybody yet. Is there anybody out there? So this is called the Fermi paradox. What's going on? So let's talk about some of the big issues in life: the origin of the universe, the Big Bang, and all that jazz. So there were two basic cosmologies, let's say 100 years ago. There's the one that we hold to, which is the Bible's version. The Bible version says that God is eternal and he made the universe. Okay, so that makes sense. The universe had a beginning sometime. Different people disagree, 6,000 years ago, 6 billion years ago, or whatever. Then the other theory was, for the atheists to escape into, was called the steady state. Steady state theory said, oh no, the universe never had a beginning. It's just always been there. Very convenient. Just always been there. Okay, it's static, nothing's happened, nothing to see here. It's always been there. So the universe didn't have a beginning. Well, nobody believes that anymore. Okay, what do they believe instead? Well, in 1931, a Catholic priest put forward the Big Bang theory. Okay? And that has come down to basically 13.6 billion years ago. There wasn't anything, there was nothing, and then it blew up. Well, that's one version, I guess. Or the slightly different version is that all the matter in the universe was condensed into one little tiny atom, and then that blew up. Don't believe me, do you? All the matter in the universe, all the trillions and zillions and zillions and zillions of kilograms of stars, was all condensed in one little spot, one little speck. Can't believe that? Anyway, so that's the Big Bang became very popular during the 1960s when they noticed two things. Here's the Big Bang, yep. So there you go, starting off with nothing or a little tiny speck, it then blew up. And in recent times, if you follow these sorts of things, there is a brand new telescope up in space, well, not that brand new anymore, called the James Webb. And that's a much bigger telescope, and they're seeing further and further and further back in time. It's got such a huge magnification on it. And what they're expecting is to be able to see pretty well back to when the Big Bang occurred. They're wondering what they're going to see. They thought they'd see not very much happening. You know what they've seen? lots and lots of galaxies. And they're going, what? How can there be a lot of galaxies when everything just started? So they're saying, well, we might have to go back to the drawing board and think about that all over again. Anyway, so what makes people believe in the Big Bang? There's two evidences for the Big Bang. First one is what they call a red shift. When you look at stars, they've got this red shift, and what that tells astronomers is that the universe is expanding. The stars are all moving away. Okay, they're speeding away off into the distance. So they say, if they're going like that, they must have all started off at one little spot. And the other one is this cosmic microwave background radiation, which I think is everywhere. Wherever you look in the universe, you can see a little bit of radiation. I think that's the result of this Big Bang. That's it. That's the evidence which they use for the Big Bang. Now, the interesting thing about the Big Bang, whether you believe it or not, and I don't believe it, I mean, we don't know exactly what God did on day one. It says he stretched out the heavens and all that sort of stuff. I mean, I obviously believe in Genesis 1. But the interesting thing about the Big Bang is that astronomers now believe the universe is not eternal. The universe had a beginning. The universe had a beginning, and that's a big thing. That's a very big thing. That pretty well everybody you'll talk to these days believes that the universe had a beginning. But it does cause some little problems for the atheist. Just a few problems. I quite like this one here. You're an atheist, yes. You don't believe in God. I don't believe in silly magic. So who created the universe? It made itself from nothing. So, I mean, isn't that irrational? Isn't that an irrational statement? That things make themselves, a bit like your bed, okay? Well, your kids might think that if they wait long enough, their bed might make itself or something like that. But I have to break it to you, it means that Mum made it. Okay, a little bit of a diversion here. This is Richard Dawkins on the universe starting from nothing.
Of course it's counterintuitive that you can get something from nothing. Of course common sense doesn't allow you to get something from nothing. That's why it's interesting. It's got to be interesting in order to give rise to the universe at all. Something pretty mysterious had to give rise to the origin of the universe. The nothing that Lawrence Krauss is talking about, whether or not it's what a naive person would conceive as nothing or what a sophisticated physicist would consider to be nothing, it is going to be something much, much simpler than a creative intelligence.
Something can't come from nothing.
Something can come from nothing, and that's what physicists are now telling us. I've been accustomed to the idea that pushing back from biology into physics, you get back to a zone where we don't understand, and you get back to a zone where there's not nothing, but sort of a primeval simplicity. What I learned from your book, which I find stunningly exciting, is that it is literally nothing. It is literally nothing. It is literally nothing. Of course, common sense doesn't allow you to get something from nothing. That's why it's interesting. It's got to be interesting in order to give rise to the universe at all. Something pretty mysterious had to give rise to the origin of the universe. Something pretty mysterious had to give rise to the origin of the universe. Something pretty mysterious had to give rise to the origin of the universe. It is literally nothing. It is literally something nothing. You can dispute exactly what's meant by nothing, but whatever it is, it's very, very simple. And why is that funny?
Well, I think it's a bit funny to be trying to define nothing.
It is literally nothing. You can dispute exactly what's meant by nothing. Something pretty mysterious had to give rise.
nothing anymore in physics.
Okay. That'll do. Yes, well, something fairly mysterious did give rise to the origin of the universe, but it wasn't nothing. It was a very big something. And logic here, what's often called the cosmological argument, in three statements. The universe had a beginning. Everybody agrees with that now. Anything that had a beginning must have been caused by something. Three, therefore, the universe was caused by something. Okay, so this is what I tell my students. I say something's got to be eternal. Either the universe is eternal and then you didn't need to make it, or the universe isn't eternal. That means somebody else had to make it who was eternal. Okay, like, if you just start with nothing, do you know what you're going to end up with? A very big nothing. Okay, that's unfortunately just logic. It doesn't matter how much Richard Dawkins talks himself around. He can't get something out of nothing. The cause is often referred to as the prime mover, the first cause, the creator, whatever you want to call it philosophically. There's also the argument from cosmological natural theology which says time, space and matter came into existence at a certain point in the finite past. Therefore, it began to exist. Okay, so they had a cause, therefore something caused them that was timeless, that is eternal, spaceless and matterless. Now the big question is people like Dawkins and others say, well, where did God come from? It's a bit of a gotcha question. Where did God come from? Well, it's got a very simple answer, hasn't it? Because although the gods of the pagans were all created, the God of the Bible is increate or uncreate. The God of the Bible never had a beginning. Okay, so don't get sucked into that little gotcha question. God didn't have a beginning. They used to say the universe didn't have a beginning. So if they say, oh, well, that's not fair, you say, well, that's what you used to do with the universe. The universe didn't have, now you say it had a beginning. Where did it come from? You had to have a cause. You have to have a first cause for the beginning of the universe. Now, it doesn't end there. There is a lot of other evidence about the universe that you should know a little bit about, I think. And that is in particular to do with what we call the fine-tuning of the universe. Now, I'm going to explain that a little bit to you. The universe to exist, and for life to exist in the universe, it must have precisely the right set of laws, sometimes called forces, for that universe and for that life to exist. So there's some of them. Okay, there's some people come up with about 100 of them. I'm going to talk about 10 of them. So there's the gravitational constant. So if the gravitational constant was too strong or too weak, there would be no expanding universe. There would be no stars. There would be no life. Okay? And if you change that gravitational constant by 1 part in 10 to the 40, which if you don't know what that is, that's 10,000 trillion, 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 trillion. So if you add 1, if you got 10 trillion, 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 trillion matches and you add just 1 extra match, it'll be too heavy. If you take 1 match off, it'll be not heavy enough. Okay? So the setting for the gravitational constant must be exactly what it is. Otherwise, there'd be no universe. Okay? This is not controversial. There's electromagnetism. If the forces are too strong or too weak, there'd be no molecules. Okay? Or the sun would be too hot or too cold. There's what they call the strong nuclear force. 2% stronger, there'd be no hydrogen. 2% weaker, there would only be hydrogen and no other atoms. There's the weak nuclear force. If it was a little bit stronger, there would be no helium, so there'd be no stars. If it was weaker, the stars would burn up too quickly, so there'd be no sun. And if you change it by 1 in 10 to the 100 this time, which is 1,000 trillion, just one match, one extra digit, okay? It's going to be off. You're going to miss it. Okay? If I had a dial with that number of trillions on it, there's no way you could get the right number. It's just impossible. And then there's the cosmological constant, which influences expansion rate of space. It must exist within an extremely narrow range. Okay? In this case, it's if you change it 1 in 10 to 120, I'm going to read those ones out, that's going to be out as well. Now, you've got to get all of these constants exactly right to have a universe that can have life. And there's others, okay? Imagine yourself in a control room with all of these dials, and somebody lets you in there and they say, okay, now you've got to set all of these dials to the exact right settings. We're not going to tell you what the settings are. And each setting has literally got trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions of possible settings on there. And you have to get every single dial on the exact right setting at the same time. Otherwise, how much of a universe do you get? Nothing. You don't start. Okay, that's a big problem. Let's hear a couple of voices from some physicists about this, okay, just to prove that I'm not making it up. This guy says, our own universe is an extraordinary place that appears to be fantastically well designed for our own existence. This specialness is not something that we can attribute to lucky accidents, which is far too unlikely. The apparent coincidences cry out for an explanation. And that just happens to be the gravitational figure there. I won't talk about that. And here are 4 of those forces. You notice that gravity is put over here. Compared to gravity, if you call that 0, the strength of the strong force is 10 to the 40, electromagnetic 10 to 30. So these are wildly different. So some of the dials you've got to dial right down near 0, and others you're dialing up really, really high. Okay, so getting all of these is just going to be totally impossible. Now, Fred Hoyle is interesting because he's the guy who founded the steady state model, and he's the guy that made fun of the Catholic priests and called his theory the Big Bang. Big Bang. And it stuck, and now everybody calls it the Big Bang theory. So Fred Hoyle is a big issue. He's an atheist. He says a common sense interpretation of the facts suggests that our super intellect, this is an atheist, okay, doesn't believe in God, that a super intellect has monkeyed with physics, not to mention chemistry and biology, and that there are no blind forces worth speaking about in nature. The numbers one calculates from the facts seem to me so overwhelming as to put this conclusion almost beyond question. You don't just need to study biology to get impacted by the idea that there must be a creator. This guy died a few years ago, Stephen Hawking. I won't worry about this other one. He said the remarkable fact is that the values of these numbers seem to have been very finely adjusted. No kidding. Yeah, very finely adjusted. I don't know if you've ever seen any of these sorts of arrangements where they're balancing a couple of shovels on a wine glass with a football. It's all just perfectly balanced. So the physical constants in the universe appear to be incredibly precise. Just a couple more. This is one that's talking about the parameters required for star formation, which is 10 to the 229, which is a very, very large number. And this atheist physicist says, in my opinion, a probability is tiny, is not something that we can let go unexplained. Luck will certainly not do here. We need some rational explanation of how something this unlikely turned out to be the case. They're in a real bind, you know. They've got to come up with an explanation of how somebody got that we just won lottery after lottery after lottery after lottery after lottery after lottery in a row. How's that possible when you're atheist? Paul Davies, very well-known astrophysicist, he says the cliche that life is balanced on a knife edge is a staggering understatement in this case. No knife in the universe could have an edge that fine. And I've got another quote from him. He says something similar. He says, the really amazing thing is not that life on Earth is balanced on a knife edge, but that the entire universe is balanced on a knife edge and would be total chaos if any of the natural constants were off even slightly. Sorry. Two more. This is Frank Tipler. When I began my career as a cosmologist some 20 years ago, I was a convinced atheist. I never in my wildest dreams imagined that one day I would be writing a book purporting to show that the central claims of Judeo-Christian theology are in fact true. I have been forced into these conclusions by the inexorable logic of my own special branch of physics. And lastly, Robert Jastrow. Astronomers now find they have painted themselves into a corner because they have proven by their own methods that the world began abruptly in an act of creation to which you can trace the seeds of every star, every planet, every living thing. And they have found out all this happens as a product of forces they cannot hope to discover. So in conclusion, whether it's the irreducible complexity of the digital code in DNA, the tiny nano robots running around inside your cells, the unique biodiversity of the planet, the Goldilocks enigmas of this privileged planet, or the precisely fine-tuned universe that had a beginning, they all point loudly and clearly to an eternal and all-powerful and all-wise and loving Creator God.
Well, thank Brother Brian for giving us that. There's not a hope in Hades that I can attempt to even summarise anything like that, so we'll just move on. I guess the only thing that I would say, I think it'd be pretty strange if each of us doesn't have one of those moments in our life where we know that we can just sit back and we can appreciate it, whether it was the magnitude of the heavens or the intricacies of some of the creation which is on here. There's two of those things that have happened in my life. One happens every Saturday when I go out on the river, and you just push back away from the shore, and you're in the dark, and the stars are out, and often the moon's out, and the river is never at the same tide height or anything like that, and you just go back and just push back, and you just go, wow, how beautiful is this? It's just a testament to God's creation every time. And the other thing, which is on the macro scale, is when I used to go diving, scuba diving, instead of taking in the whole big picture of what I was seeing below the surface, I used to just lie on the bottom and wait for all the little bits and pieces, both plants and animals, to come to me, because they would get used to your presence, and I would just enjoy looking at things that are this big and this big, and again, it was they just wow moments, and you just think you can't escape the fact that if you're an atheist, that eventually you've got to turn around and say, yeah, there's God. It's absolutely wonderful. And I'm sure all of us have those sorts of things in our lives. We're going to close this evening by singing hymn number 408, followed by a word of prayer. Elohim of Israel, thou hast created all things beyond our comprehension. We cannot begin to know the intricacies and the wonders of thy creation, O Yahweh, but we know, because of what we do understand, the insignificant amounts which we do, we know that thou hast created all things and thou art a significant God. Thou art the Lord of the heaven and the earth and the seas, everything that thou hast created, but most importantly, thou hast created thy Son, our Lord Jesus Christ. Thou brought him into this world that we might be redeemed once again unto thee, loving Father. Please help us to that end, that we might appreciate thee, not take thee for granted, and the things which we do, that we say, that we think, how we conduct ourselves with each other and with every person wherever we go, might be giving glory to thy great and holy name and to thy personage. We thank thee for the providing of this supper. We offer these our thanks for all these blessings and thank thee through Jesus, our Saviour's name. Amen.